My name is Alan Newberry, and today we're going to be working on the third part of a four-part series on making a stock removal knife. So what we're going to do in this episode is we are going to take a finished blade, and we're going to end up with this right here, which is a knife that has had a little bit of pre-shaping on the handles and has been glued up. So let's go take a look.
The first thing that we're going to do is to mark out the handle material. So we place the knife onto the handle material and trace it out. Then we're going to flip the knife over and trace the other side. The reason that we're flipping it over and tracing the other side is so that we have the same part of the handle material that is on the top is going to be touching the inside of the knife, so that as we grind through the layers, we'll be grinding through the same layers. We are now cutting the brown canvas micarta on the bandsaw. We are being very careful not to cut any of those marks. We're giving a good amount of leeway there so that we make sure we have enough handle material to cover all of the metal portion of the handle. What we are left with is a slightly oversized piece of handle material, and what we will do now is to clamp that handle material to the blade, and we will use the holes that we've already drilled as a drill guide so that we get the holes positioned on the handle material in exactly the right spot. Now, with the blade securely fastened to the handle material with the clamp, we are going to drill the first hole. After we drill the first hole, what we're going to do is put a temporary pin of some sort into that hole through the blade material, and in this case we're going to use a drill bit. Then we will adjust the clamp so that it will be out of the way of the drill, and we are going to make sure again here that we have a little bit of fudge room all the way around, so we've got the blade in just the right position, and then we'll clamp it down, and then we will go back over there and again use our hole that was drilled through the metal as a guide for the hole that we are drilling through the handle material. Drilling holes tends to put a little bump on the back side of the handle material, so I like to go and flatten that off before I move on to the next step, which is to go ahead and line up everything and pin it all together with temporary pins. Again, in this case I'm using drill bits. This allows me to see how everything lines up and to help me visualize how much I need to remove when I move back over here to the grinder and start grinding a little bit of a curve there at the part where the blade meets the handle. Right now I'm again using the drill bits as temporary pins to hold the two handle scales together. I have removed the actual knife blade, but these pins will hold it together so that I can shape both of them at the same time and have them match up really well. I like to start this grinding off with either a 60 grit belt or a 36 grit belt, and then I move all the way up through the grits to whatever the final finish that I want for my handle to be, in this case a 400 grit belt. This leaves a nice finished look. On my knives I tend to prefer to have an angled transition on the handle material as opposed to just that flat part that we have already ground. So what I'm doing here is I've got my angle set up on the grinder, and then I just kind of follow that along and make a nice little angle, starting off again with a 36 grit belt in this case, and then I'll eventually get down to 400 grit belt, which will put a nice finish on it. On this particular knife I'm using Corby bolts, which require a specialized drill bit that puts in a little shelf so that the two ends that screw together will have a little area to squeeze in and hold the knife together. So this is a pretty nice bond and provides a nice mechanical fastener for your knife. When drilling for a Corby bolt, you can either set a depth stop on your drill press, or you can drill a little and then check and drill and check and make sure that you don't go too far. If you go too far, sometimes you can just trim a little bit off of the shaft of the Corby bolt. Also, I like to always do a dry fit up before gluing so that I don't make any mistakes while the glue's starting to set up. Also, when you're setting up for gluing, always get everything ready. Get your clamps set to the right thickness. Make sure you have your acetone for cleaning it up, and all your supplies ready. You'll want to use an epoxy that has a drying time that's long enough so that you can get your knife actually put together. Corby bolts can sometimes be a little finicky, so you want to make sure that you have enough time to get everything put together before that glue starts setting up. In this case, I'm using a 30-minute, 15-minute would be fine. 5-minute, you can get it done, but if anything goes wrong, you can get yourself into a bind really quick. Now I'm coating all the surfaces with the epoxy, just getting a nice thin layer over everything. I was making sure especially that I get the handle scales really well. Then I'm also going to put a little bit of a layer onto the actual metal. And then even whenever I'm putting the stuff together, I try to get a little bit on the pins or Corby bolts, thong hole tubing, that sort of thing. Another huge note is that surface preparation is very important for glue up. You want to make sure you've got the handle nice and flat, that you've got the handle scales nice and flat, and that you have everything clean. So I clean everything off with acetone before applying any glue and then give it a chance to dry. That way I know there's not a bunch of grease on there. It's very important because you do want everything to stick really well. Notice here I use the table to push down on that Corby bolt just a little bit, and in this case it screws together really well with just the one screwdriver, but I have another little screwdriver over there too because sometimes it'll just want to spin in there. In this case it was snug enough that it wanted to hold really well, so one screwdriver did it, but sometimes you need two. And my clamps are already set to the right size for the finished knife. Once you have everything all clamped up, it's time to clean off the excess epoxy that was squished out whenever you put it all together. So what I use is paper towel and a little bit of acetone, and that cleans it right up. So I make sure especially that I don't have any on the blade itself and that I don't have any on those little curved areas. Anything on the top of the scales where the clamps are, up by the pins, it's all going to get ground off anyway, so it's not a big deal. Once it's all cleaned up, make sure you put it down on something like a piece of wax paper that it won't get stuck to. And here's the knife now that the epoxy is hardened and the clamps have been removed.
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please put them down in the comments section below, and be sure to subscribe so that you'll know whenever the next part comes out. Thanks.